A mom arrives at her 8-year-old daughter's school to pick her up, but discovers that she has gotten lost. She is worried and looks everywhere for her until she returns home late at night and finds her daughter with a baby in the entryway. Madison Hunt, the 6-year-old daughter of Barbara and Edward Hunt, moved to Sausalito, California, when she was 6 years old. For the first 2 years, Barbara accompanied Madison to and from school. But when Madison turned 8, Edward advised that Barbara allow Madison to go to school on her own since she was already a big girl and school was near to their house. Barbara was a stay-at-home mom who looked forward to transporting Madison to school every day. Madison, she thought, was still too little to be left alone. When Edward persisted, she caved. She gave Madison a phone and put a little notepad in her bag with their home address and vital contacts in case Madison needed to call them. That was really advantageous. Madison would always notify Barbara if she went to a friend's home after school or was late because she went to a park near her school. Barbara could rest easy knowing her child was protected. Barbara was bored one day at home, so she thought to surprise Madison by bringing her daughter from school. She also intended to take her to a nearby ice cream shop after that. She arrived just in time for Madison's school, and as the bell sounded, children rushed out the front door. Barbara saw Madison's pals, Alice and Catherine, but Madison was nowhere to be seen. Madison, she concluded, was almost certainly stopped by something, so she chose to wait. Barbara decided to go inside and look for Madison when she didn't come out after a few minutes. She went to her classroom to make sure she was still there. Mrs. Blake, Madison's teacher, was sitting at her desk, reviewing papers when she noticed the classroom was empty. "Do you call yourself Mrs. Blake?" Barbara approached her with trepidation. "Did you happen to run into Madison?" "I waited for her at the gate, but she never came out." "Oh my goodness, Mrs. Hunt!" "Please accept my apologies. Please accept my apologies. I had entirely forgotten to call you. Madison hasn't been to school in over a week. I was afraid she was ill. She failed to appear today. And do you see what I'm carrying? We had an exam and she failed." "What?" When Mom discovered her 8-year-old daughter hadn't been attending courses, she hurried through Barbara. "What exactly do you mean?" "Every morning, she departs for school." "That's odd, Mrs. Hunt, given that she hasn't been attending her lessons. Is everything all right at home?" Barbara couldn't think of anything to say. She hurried out of school and called Madison, but she didn't answer. Madison's phone was switched off at one point, and she contacted her many times without success. Barbara was sinking within herself, worried about where her daughter had gone. She searched for Madison at parks and restaurants near the school, and she phoned every classmate she knew, but no one knew anything. Barbara was sobbing at this point, so she contacted Edward and told him everything. He told Barbara to wait near the school, and he arrived within a few minutes. They looked at every park, cafe, restaurant, and neighbor's home between their house and the school, but Madison was nowhere to be seen. It was nearly 8 p.m. by the time Edward and Barbara arrived home. As they looked for Madison, they didn't notice when the day faded to darkness. Barbara was weeping on the way home from school, and they planned to call the authorities as soon as they got home. But they were still 2 homes away when Barbara saw Madison wave goodbye to a guy on the street from a distance. "Edward," she exclaimed, "Maddie has arrived. She's standing just outside our door." "What?" Edward's brows furrowed as he knew Barbara was correct. "Thank you, God." They went to her as soon as they got out of the automobile. They looked at each other, puzzled, when they saw Madison wasn't alone, but was cradling a baby wrapped in a white towel. "Who's that child, Madison? And who was the little child who had just left?" Barbara was confused and inquired. Madison bowed her head and apologized to her mother. "Could we please speak inside?" "No, Madison," Barbara said emphatically. "You must first respond to me. Do you realize how concerned my father and I were? We were about to call the cops." Madison's head trembled. "No way, Mommy! Please! Layla is going to be taken away. Please do not contact the police. I have to keep Layla safe." "Darling," Edward called out to Barbara, "please let me handle this, okay?" "Is the baby's name Madison or Layla?" he inquired. "How did you track her down, honey?" "Layla is the sister of my buddy, Terrence, Papa. His grandmother is unwell and unable to care for Layla, and she refuses to go to the hospital because she believes the police will take her away. Layla's parents visited the angel around 2 months ago. Edward and Barbara shared troubled glances, realizing Terrence's grandmother was concerned that social services would take Layla away since she couldn't care for her. "How come you didn't come to class, honey? Mommy attempted to contact you today, but your phone was switched off. I apologize. I travel to Terrence's home every day to care for Layla, so I don't have time to attend school. When he comes home from school, I go home. I didn't check my phone when we were playing with Layla today. The phone was dead when I finally decided to contact Mom. Terrence's grandmother was in critical condition today, so Terrence and I spent the whole day caring for her. That's why I arrived late. I apologize. I kept quiet because I was afraid I wouldn't be allowed to play with Layla again." Barbara and Edward realized it wasn't all Madison's responsibility. They didn't punish her because she was just trying to help a friend, but they did tell her it was wrong to skip school. "Can we keep Layla here? Terrence is unable to care for her alone, and his grandmother is ill." "Well, honey," Barbara said, "we can't keep someone else's kid with us like that, but Papa and I will find a way to assist her. Now let's head inside. It's starting to become chilly." Baraba and Edward went to Terrence's home the next day and told his grandmother, Mrs. Peterson, everything. They also promised to help her raise Layla so she wouldn't have to go to the authorities and risk losing custody of her daughter. The elderly lady was overcome with emotion and couldn't stop thanking Edward and Barbara. Barbara began spending more time at Terrence's place, caring for Layla and Mrs. Peterson as time passed. She fell in love with Layla and one day asked Edward whether she and Terrence might be adopted. Edward was delighted to have Layla and Terrence as his children, but he advised Barbara to first approach Mrs. Peterson. Barbara submitted the proposal to Mrs. Peterson after considerable deliberation, and she was startled when Mrs. Peterson consented. "See, honey," she said, "I'm an elderly bird who is constantly concerned about what will happen to my grandkids once I die. If you take them in, I'll be relieved and pleased to know they're in excellent care." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Peterson," Barbara explained. "We were also curious whether you wanted to live with us. The youngsters, you see, would welcome the presence of their grandma. What are your thoughts?" "Angel," she explained. "You really are an angel, honey. I am certain that God sent you and your spouse to assist us. Oh my God, I'm so grateful. Thank you a lot." Mrs. Peterson, Terrence, and Layla moved in with the Hunts on that day. 2 months after Edward and Barbara started the adoption process, Terrence and Layla were officially taken in as their own children.